All right, now let's turn attention to the Nigerian economy that is reported to have grown by 3.84% in the fourth quarter of the year 2024. So this is the second quarter in 2025. Let's take a mind back to what happened in the last quarter of 2024. This is a report that has been released by the CBN, and according to that report, the non-oil sector was the primary driver of the expansion in Nigeria's economy. So the economy expanded by 22.61 trillion naira, according to latest Central Bank of Nigeria CBN economic report. Like I mentioned earlier, the non-oil sector was the primary driver of the expansion, particularly the financial and insurance sector, alongside information and communication. There's also the transportation sector, storage, crop production, and trade. So we're going to take it bit by bit and look at the contributions of the various sectors, beginning with the financial and insurance subsector, contributing majorly to the expansion in Nigeria's economy. The financial sector has been doing quite well. In that sector, you have the money market, you have the capital markets, you also have the insurance sector, which, yes, recently has been improved further with a new policy, So different events happening within the financial sector to make it strong. We find that even in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, you find the banking sector always performing and declaring profit. So they contributed to the expansion of Nigeria's economy by 22.61 trillion naira in the last quarter of 2024. We also have the information and communication sector. You know how we talked about the struggles in the communication sector recently, and then the back and forth regarding the increase in tariff for the telecommunications operators. So these sectors doing their bit, performing, being the primary driver of the economy, not oil sector this time around.
Well, I think for me, it's even becoming a blessing for us as a country that the oil sector is taking the back stage, because I think that has held us whole stage for too long.
Is it really a blessing, or were the one not harnessing the potentials of the oil sector?
The contradictions that came with the oil, and that's why, of course, that debate has been on in the public sector, whether the discovery of oil in Nigeria was a blessing or a curse. And for most analysts, they see that oil is more of a cost to us than a blessing, because we really have not been able to enjoy the benefit that comes from that sector. And the reason why we have also not been able to negotiate in recent time our federalism is because of the fact that everybody feels that since the more money is coming from that sector, and therefore we have to be politically correct in navigating our fragile unity. And I think for me, seeing that in recent time that in terms of contribution to the GDP, that oil has not been in the forefront, and I think it's a plus. And that's on the one side. But again, coming to the banking sector, of course, which is the only sector that seems to be doing very well at the moment in Nigeria, is another question that people are also really worried about. We're seeing big companies in the manufacturing, in telcos and the rest of them, declaring huge loss. But in the finance sector recently, we are seeing jumbo profits, where individual chairmen are earning up to 25 billion for dividend in the last quarter. It tells you to what extent that you're having first tier one banks whose profit had hit 1 trillion naira. And this is the picture of the growth in that sector. And it seems to be the only sector that is making profit. Again, a lot of people will argue because there's so much that has been done within that sector in terms of reform, the contribution of technology in driving that entire sector had actually helped that sector to grow. And so it's like it's skewing toward one side. And the manufacturing, some of them are exiting, some of them are shutting down, which of course is a big plus. The rail sector is not seeing enough stimulus to grow, as it were. And what government will be able to do in that regard is something that we must actually be looking at. But for me, having that we have grown in the last quarter of 2024 with about 3.8%, something that, of course, is praiseworthy. But spreading the growth across our sector is something that government must need to pursue.
Talking about spreading the growth, how about spreading it to the agricultural sector? We come back to the agricultural sector.
Okay, coming back to the agriculture. But before then, before really taking the conversation down to the agricultural sector, we have to understand that this specific increase that he was talking about, he said the substantial increase reflects a growing reliance on personal loans amid prevailing economic conditions. The report indicated that personal loans increased significantly from 21.27%, reaching 3.82 trillion naira compared to 3.15 trillion naira as reported to the preceding quarter of the year.
Is that for the financial sector?
Yes, for the in giving out loans to Nigeria for personal credit loans. Now, we must understand that small and medium-sized enterprises are, if we look critically very well, they are the bastion and the base, the foundation of independence, growth, and development in Nigeria. The woman who is selling by the roadside, the women, those who operate kiosks, those who operate the point of sale businesses, and those with the minimum of 200,000 naira, 150,000 naira, they can go start a little shop by the roadside. And we have different markets in Lagos, in other states in the country. Through that small amount between 200 or 150,000 naira and 500,000 naira can operate a shop to run a personal business and, be their own boss. And when they start, when it comes to taking decisions to run their business, they don't need to rely on any other person, apart from maybe having one or two advice from those who are running the same business but on a different pedestal. They become their own bosses. They run their own business. The capital that is required to start those businesses are not something that is very, very far away. They can, source for such capital through access to other people's money by asking other people to borrow money from family or from neighbors. They equally have access to those monies since the banks at the moment in time have started giving out loans totaling from sometimes they look at how much you earn for those who access loan through their salary accounts from 200,000, 300,000, 500,000. And most of these loans that are acquired by these people, they are used to.
Let's look at, let's move away from the financial sector now and look at the agricultural sector. So among the primary drivers, yes, among the primary drivers, we had the economy. The economy expanded by 22.16 trillion naira. So among the primary drivers, we had the financial sector, which we're talking about, the financial sector now doing well, giving loans. Let's look at the agricultural sector, because storage also performed well. Now, if we're talking about finance, talking about loans, to what area should these loans be channeled to improve the agricultural sector, to ensure that we're getting more from agriculture? In our earlier conversation, we talked about the government's plan to improve nutrition. This can be done with the agricultural sector, but how do we expand that sector to make more contribution to the economy and also to Nigerians?
If we're talking about expanding the agricultural sector, a few things that will need to be done by the government is this. And I've said it before. Security. How are we going to expand the agricultural sector if those who have access to loan or they have access to fund, to finance, rice farming, cassava plantation, if they have access to those funds, but their lives are not secured in their farms? There is no protection because herders or criminals will ransack their farms, got their animals to eat up their harvest, eat up their crop, and walk away. How is he going to pay back? How is she going to pay back? So that security, most especially subnational government, needs to not only make law, but to make sure that they have task forces. It's time we develop task forces in the farms and the bushes. We start having forest rangers, as was proposed some time ago, because our forests have been completely depleted and farmers, are not really having a good time at the moment. So if we are going to give out loans to even small-scale farmers, even subsistent farmers, how are they going to make sure that they recoup their loans and to pay back this? The other thing is this. We'll buy, sometimes because we don't have storage facilities, sometimes the farmer harvests is our crop, and some of these are perishable goods like tomato. And a few of them have access to buyers from the industry or from the manufacturers who will come to buy them in larger quantities and in bulk. And if there's a specific time these goods and these cash products are supposed to survive, if they cannot get it to the end user within that frame of time, then they stand to bear the brunt and the loss of it. They cannot recoup their loans. So who is going to be the one to build these places where they can store it? Is it the government that's going to build it, or probably there's an ecosystem, or there's a vacuum in this place? We need to have businessmen or investors in that space to build these facilities, to house it, and to be able to store the product. How much is this going to cost? And it's not going to store them that way, because they're going to be, be challenged and be faced with the problem of electricity to store these goods. So if they are going to rely on diesel, on petrol to fuel their alternative power source, or the green energy to make sure they keep the power running to sustain these goods, that in itself, because of the capital intensiveness to sustain such level of business, is going to make the price of foodstuff increase at the other end. So in the other end, we are defeating the real purpose and intention. So none of these industries, none of these ministries are unilaterally have the ability to stand alone. They are connected to each other, and the effectiveness and productivity of each of these ministries will affect the productivity of the other.
Yeah, but talking about the agri-sector contribution, if you look at it, in 2024, it did about 25.5% contribution to the GDP, which is, of course, very huge and massive, as against oil contribution of 5.5%. And the service sector contributing about 57% to the cumulative GDP of the nation. So what that also suggests is the fact that the agricultural sector is also performing. Because if you took the trend in the last 8 years, thereabout, you've seen that it has been dominating that sector in terms of the value addition to the GDP for Nigeria. It's only just going to say that we need to do more investment, targeted investment in this sector. And if there's anything that for me would just have been the plus for all of us, is the fact that, earlier in the conversation we talked about the 500 million naira facility from the World Bank.
$500 million.
Dollars from the World Bank that is going to social service, as it were. If this money, we can actually apply it into, for example, the new Ministry of Animal Husbandry, the livestock ministry. That all that we need just to do is to say how much more money we can get from dairy products alone. Countries are living on dairy products. Denmark, for example, fresh milk and cheese to Europe and to America is fetching them hundreds of billions of dollars annually. And we have that potential in Nigeria. And this is where we need to actually put our energy as a country. And how do we grow that sector? How do we develop the agri sector, especially the livestock aspect? That's massive. There's cassava. Yes, at the moment we are about the second largest producer of cassava worldwide after Brazil. Now, look at that sector. is also underperforming because beyond the fufu and the gari, as we call it here, even the extract, which is required by most pharmaceuticals globally, we are also not investing in it and exploiting in that aspect. Look at, for example, the cashew nuts. We have not been able to bridge that gap of demand and supply. And I remember it was Professor Patu told me when he gave a figure that he was in Vietnam, and they were telling him that, look, we need X amount of cashew from Nigeria, but this is all we can get. So which means that there's a gap in that sector. Look at the palm oil sector. We have a huge gap. Now, all this gap, how are we going to invest in them and actually getting resource out of these areas to develop our environment? And I think that is what those who are in government must be thinking about, because the agri sector really is a huge potential for Nigeria because of the weather condition.
Okay, so the report also revealed that for the electricity, gas, steam, air conditioning subsector, they contracted by 5.05%, mainly due to higher electricity tariffs, ongoing grid maintenance, a shift towards alternative energy sources, and analysts are suggesting that policy intervention would be good for these sectors and enhancing infrastructure, particularly in the power sector, which we talked about. But what actually helped the financial sector was technology upgrade, more bank penetration, and some policies that happened that were implemented within that sector too. So going forward to improve on these gains, the results for the first quarter of 2025 is not out yet because the first quarter of 2025 just ended yesterday. So perhaps sometime in the second quarter of 2025 would have the results, or the report rather, for 2025 first quarter to know how the economy performed. But these sectors that have done well, that have driven expansion in the economy, talking about the financial sector, agricultural sector, insurance sector, and some other sectors, but basically the non-oil sector, a lot can be done. We need improvement in infrastructure, particularly for the electricity subsector. We also need that for the agricultural sector, the government should do more in expanding the capacity of the agricultural sector. We focus sometimes a lot more on crop production, but not on the value chain to ensure that we're getting the gains. And even the livestock, like Doc pointed out, is very crucial. We know how much Nigeria spends on importation of dairy products, you know. They're very expensive even. So we can do a whole lot more to ensure that it's not just cattle we're consuming as meat, but we're also getting more than that from cattle. Cattle rearing can be a huge investment that Nigeria can make, and then we'll begin to get more gains from it.
If our electricity sector must do well, there's a need to break the monopoly in that sector.
Which monopoly now? The discos?
Now, disco monopoly.
Okay.
Now, imagine that we are running that sector like the telecom sector.
That was the intent originally.
Where, of course,
but we do know that
depending on where you are, you can either choose between who give you service.
But when the discos are currently struggling...
Now, the way the discos are structured, you have territory allocated to this disco. And, of course, nobody can come and play in that sector.
Sure.
But I think that what can be done is actually for government to open up that sector and allow many more players, so that if one service is not good to you in your region, you switch to the other. And
you can allow discos from other states, other areas to penetrate the market.
So that it becomes really competitive. Because monopoly is not too good or healthy for economic growth.
Not even
so because when you give one person power to drive the entire process, so Imagine now, for example, they don't even need to do anything. Whether you consume electricity or not, the service charge is there that they must collect at the end of the month. So whether they supply or don't supply, they are making their money. And this is enough. And so investing in that sector becomes difficult. But once you increase competition in that sector, I think we are going to do more. So rather than just allow very few discos to control the electricity market, I think there's a need to license more.
All right.
Just the way we are licensing
We need to wrap up in this.
refineries, we should also license more discos to participate in the distribution of electricity. Probably that could be the solution that will eventually give us electricity at the end of the day.
And it may not just be licensing of new discos. Existing discos that are performing in other areas should be allowed to expand to other places so that it now becomes an issue of what is the quality of your service, not because the people in that area have no choice but just to cope with a particular disco. We've come to the end of this show. It's been a wonderful one. Remember that it is the first of the second quarter in the year 2025. It's 1st of April. So as you might want to prank someone because it's April's Fool Day, be careful. Know the extent of prank that you can pull on someone so it doesn't become something else. You don't get to receive maybe beating or something. Don't prank your boss if you want to collect your salary in full. If you must, ensure that the prank is measured, not the one that will mean that you don't get to receive your salary for that month. I am Blessing Eichie. I wish you a very good month. And for those holidaying, enjoy the rest of your day. Tomorrow you get to resume work and it continues that way. Doc?
Yeah, talking about opportunity here, Chooks is asking Africa for opportunity. This is April full of plenty of opportunities. But remember, opportunities don't just happen. You create them. Go out there the whole month of April and create wonderful opportunities for success. Have a blessed day. Join us and follow us on all our social media handles and let the conversation continue.
And from me, I want to say a very big thank you for sticking with us this morning. You're going to work tomorrow, so be prepared to have yourself a splendid day ahead.